So we were going to implement the buff obstacle, right? So we have our inherited scene and a script, and we'll save this out. And right, the templates don't have a model. That's right, that's why this is here, and that's why we're going to create some concrete scenes that will extend buff obstacle. But before we do that, we can take a stab at providing words, parameters, exports to set what the effect of the buff tower is, buff obstacle, whatever. So export var buff type. We have like enums, right? In here. I think there's supposed to be commas. Yeah. So is this what we wanted? Let's go back to our list of things. Okay, we wanted to buff attack range, attack cooldown, and damage. Cooldown, range, so aka cooldown, reduction. No, not coup. Damage and range. Damage and range. Yeah. Okay. And then the amount. Seconds between applying buffs. This is, I don't think it's going to work this way, right? So we definitely could have a. How is that going to work? Like, we wouldn't want the buffs to stack. But do we want to have something where it's every second the tower applies the effect to things in range? That could be interesting. That could be interesting specifically because we could have upgrades that or we can have variations or something in that. Let's do that. What's interesting is then, no, it's fine. I mean, it's sort of like the timer that we have for the shooting obstacle, but the shooting obstacle has other logic for like finding enemies and stuff, whereas this is going to find all the things that all of the other obstacles in the range and apply that. And I bet now, yeah, so we have buff timer, sure. We have ready. That's not how you do. Oh, right, we haven't implemented apply buffs yet. So we find obstacles. I think it's just obstacles. Let's check. Lots of words. So if we just do case sensitive search, is that the name of the group? Obstacle group is obstacles. It feels like this is something where we should have like a constant for this. Maybe like here. This is a different group. This is the navigation mesh source group, which is the thing that indicates that the obstacle should affect navigation, like the comment says. That is different. But does that mean, so in the base scene, yeah, groups obstacles right there, right? So that is what makes it so that all the obstacles are always in that group. I think we're gonna do something like const obstacle group there. I think this export, we actually use this somewhere, right? We add it to that group. Let's rename the symbol to navigation obstacle group is probably better. I don't know why that needs to be an export even. Right, this is just something that's hard-coded in places. I think I'm gonna leave that like that for now, but having the obstacle group as a constant on entity placeable obstacle will be good, because then in buff obstacle, what we can do is we can say get nodes in group obstacle group, right? So I'll find all the obstacles in the scene tree that are in that group, and then for each obstacle, if it's us, we skip. If it's not a valid instance, is instance valid? If it's not been deleted from memory, okay, sure. If distance is less than or equal to effect range, apply the buff to the obstacle. I'm just gonna accept what AI is writing for me, and we'll look at and see if this is actually going to work. This is interesting. Okay, so if the buff type is attack speed, if the obstacle has an attack component, we change the attack component. Some magical things going on here, like that max 0.1. Trying to establish essentially like a minimum cooldown for things, but there are problems with this, right? So if think about this a little bit. So there are a couple of issues, right? So one, you know, what are valid minimums? Why do we know what that is? Versus like the attack component, assuming that obstacles have an attack component, which like the shooting obstacles will. And I believe, yeah, they're registered through that metadata. But then also, if the tower, like the buff obstacle goes away, is destroyed, if obstacles are somehow moving, their range changes. But also, this is a stacking buff, right? Every time the timer ticks, it's going to change the attack cooldown, and that's cool, but not what we want. Also, like reaching into the obstacles to change the effect range indicator. Like that should happen automatically if we're changing effect range. But the question is, do we want to do it this way? Versus what? I'm not sure. Let's think about that. It feels like maybe we should somehow invert this, where we construct something that we hand to the obstacle to be like, hey, you've been buffed by this. So that we can keep track of, have we buffed the thing? Like the specific node that's applying the buff would tell the target, you've been buffed by me in this way. Well, even it wouldn't even matter, right? I think we're not going to plan on things applying multiple buffs to the same thing, so we would just need to keep track of, I applied the thing to you, and what is that thing? Yeah, I think I'm liking that idea. Maybe that's as simple as the target obstacle can have an array, a dictionary of things that have buffed it. Where the key would be like the ID of the node. These are all transitory things. They wouldn't necessarily, they don't need to persist through like a save or anything like that. We don't, well, one, we don't save mid scenario anyway. It's all like transient state. So if we did that, then we could be like, do this. But how do we... Okay, so all that aside, then the question is, if somehow the, like, if the timer ticks and we apply buffs to obstacles, and one of the obstacles that we previously applied the buff to, it no longer is applied, how do we undo it? How do we put the cooldown back? How do we put the damage back? The effect range back? So, when we're looking at shooting obstacle, how is the attack component used? We perform attack. Take a look at that attack component. Right, so the attack component owns the damage amount and damage cooldown and damage source and effects and those sorts of things, right? Do we kind of just like sprinkle in knowledge about buffs to all of these things? Do we... Here's damage amount. The attack component has the target, finds the target's health, and sends not a signal, but it calls damage, take damage on the health of the target. It feels like it would be something where things that can be buffed can be responsible for applying this and restoring it. So maybe this is something where what we want to do is we want to check to see if the target obstacle has a method. If it has a method, we pass things to it, and it's responsible for then figuring out how to apply the buff type and the amount. And that means that we don't have to like have stuff about, does it have this metadata on the obstacle and those things that feel out of place. So what if we did something like this, where we say, if obstacle.has method receive buff. Yeah, like that. And we send the buff type and the buff amount. And do we have like an ID? Identity? No. Instance ID? So get instance ID returns the object's unique instance ID. This ID can be saved at an encoded object as ID and can be used to retrieve this object's instance with global scope.instance from ID. This ID is only useful during the current session. It won't correspond to a similar object if the ID is sent over a network or loaded from a file at a later time. If we were doing multiplayer things, that might be an issue. But we're not. We're explicitly not. And my thinking here is that by providing an ID of the thing that is doing the buff, we can keep track of, have we been buffed by this thing already? So that we're not applying... that allows us to receive multiple buffs from multiple support towers, but not have the same buff stack from the same tower. Now, really the only thing that's going to receive buffs for now is going to be the shooting obstacle. I mean, we could do ranged obstacle, right? Because we do have a buff type of range. So we could do something fun here, like support buffing of the range of this obstacle. Def, or this is not Python. Receive buff, right? So buff amount, source ID. I don't think that's an integer. Is instance ID an integer? It is. Okay. Great. So if buff type is range, then we save the original range. We increase the effect range. We log. We update the range indicator. Think about this. So this doesn't do the thing, right, that I was just talking about of keeping track of have we already been buffed by the source ID. If we, how do we lose a buff? How do we lose a buff? Well, I guess the buff is only supposed to last for a period of time, but we don't tell it that, right? So there is a buff interval, right? And so then we become responsible for clearing the buff. I think that there's some timing there where, like, because the buff is going to apply the buff again on its cooldown timer. So I guess that's fine. Think about this for a little bit more. Do I want to... I think what I want to do is I'm going to take this method and we're going to implement this on the base class. And we're going to kind of address some of the things that I'm thinking about here. Okay, and we'll have some AI generated documentation. Yep. Okay, and then we should keep track of the buffs applied so they can remove after the timeout, and so that they are not stacked multiple times from the same source. Okay, and so then the idea is that we're going to have some var buffs, which is a dictionary. Dictionary to track active buffs on this obstacle. The key is the source ID, and then the value is a dictionary with the buff type, buff amount, and timeout timer. I think that makes sense. When the timer elapses, we unwind the buff. And if applying the buff and unwinding the buff happen on this internal timer, and then the buff obstacles timer is reapplying things, there could be some, like, you know, for a fraction of a second you have you're double buffed or unbuffed or something. It's probably fine. So it gives us a bunch of logic. Now the question is going to be, do I want to implement the buff effect handling here? What is remove buff? Maybe not. Let's define an interface here where we're saying func handle add buff. I don't want to do, I just want buff type, buff amount, and that's it. Right? So then we don't actually want the implementation here. We just want to say for this base class. Yeah, those words. And then we want to do the opposite, right, of handle remove buff. And so then this receive buff method is responsible for keeping track of, did we get the buff or not, applying it by calling handle add buff, setting up the timer, and calling handle remove buff. And then in our subclasses, we can just implement the handlers. So let's see what AI generates for us. So if we already have a buff with the source ID, we reset the timer. This assumes, I'll take that code, and this assumes that the buff effects from source ID are always the same, right? Because we're not checking to see if the buff type or the buff amounts are different. We're assuming that if a node of a particular ID is effectively sending this signal, not a literal signal, but by calling this method, it's always going to be the same effect, and we just need to reset the timer. I guess technically we could update the values, but that's not going to change anything because we're not calling handle add buff in this section. And I think this is fine for now. I'm just kind of thinking through what are the implications of this code that was just generated. So if we don't already have a buff applied from the source, handle it. We set up our timeout timer that will, at timeout, one-shot auto start. So as soon as we add child, it will start the timer. And when the timeout happens, we've removed the buff, we erase it from the dictionary, and we free the timeout timer. So we do the cleanup. And then we store the buff info, right? So we store buff type, buff amount, timeout timer. I guess that's fine. Why do we need to store anything in the dictionary? Right, the only thing we read out of the buffer, or the dictionary of buffs, is that it exists, and that's it, right? Because we close over the values here to call handle remove buff. So we don't read those values out of the dictionary, so we don't need any of that. We do read the timeout timer. So I guess for now it's just going to be the timeout timer. And I'm going to keep it as a dictionary, because if I change my mind, it's maybe a little easier if the value in the dictionary is already a dictionary, we'll just add more keys rather than it converting the type and maybe breaking things. So we'll just do that. Okay. So all of this does nothing for a couple of reasons. We've not actually implemented any support buff towers yet. And we haven't implemented any kind of handling for applying the buffs, but we're on our way. We're on our way. So we're gonna copy that, go to range obstacle, and we want to implement the ability to I somehow managed to only select the one line. We want to implement handle add buff. This is a lie. Match buff type. But we only want to do range here. So we want to change the effect range. We could change the scale. This is the logic here. I kind of want to do this a different way though, right? So can we do this? Hold on. Yes. And then what we can do is we can so the real question is, can I in the setter be like, if this is set the scale. Now we still need to do this in ready, maybe. Assigns parent value to the given parent property doesn't exist. Yada yada yada. Okay, that doesn't talk about how that works as a setter. Right. So I think we still need to have it in ready. I suspect what will happen is that this code will get executed prior to the scene tree being ready and calling _ready. And so effect range indicator will be null. But after the fact, if we change the scale, if we change the effect range, then we don't need this code because the setter will update it for us. Okay, and then handle remove buff is simply remove the buff amount from the effect range and then make sure it's not 0 or less than 0. Just in case, just to keep it from being a negative number. Okay, so theoretically, we would have the ability to see this happen. What we need to do now is we need to actually make a concrete scene for our buff tower. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to buff obstacle TSCN, new inherited scene, and this is going to be range buff obstacle. And we're going to save this. I should actually make it the name that we want to call. It's a range amplifier. Yeah, let me. Range amplifier. Something I don't think I showed on stream, but I worked on a number of weeks ago, is a tech tree. Specifically a editor for a tech tree. Can we format that? There we go. Yeah, there you go. Range amplifier. Okay, just want to make sure the name matches. Great. Okay, so this does nothing because we don't have a model. Also, we need to actually set the buff type. Buff amounts will be, let's make it substantial, right? So I think the default range for things is like 15. So we'll add another 15. Every second we'll reapply it. This will be fun because if you have multiple range amplifiers, they're not going to. That might be that might have some consequences. We'll see. Okay, so let's add our assets, models, tower. Okie dokie. That is a tower, I'm saying. And we're gonna add a collision shape? Collision shape 3D. And we will add a box shape. Let's get a rough size here so that we can see what we're doing. Do we have no, we don't have, like, yeah, we have to click the things here to see. Zoom in a bit. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Close enough is close enough. I think that's close enough. Okay, so we got that. That's our range amplifier. Now we need the ability to actually use it in the game. So for that, we need to go to config, obstacles, and we right-click, create new resource. And this is going to be an obstacle, resource obstacle type. And this is going to be, what did I call it? Range amplifier. Amplifier. There it is. And then, so I think the ID needs to be range amp. This is our range amplifier. Placeholder. Speaking of placeholders, placeholder icon. We'll pick a color. The color of this thing will be this. It's not offensive. Cost is 10 scrap. And then we select the scene. We select our range amplifier scene. There we go. Required tech IDs. So this would be how it integrates with the tech tree. I guess I'll add that. And I think we're just using the same ID here and there. So now if I run this, we'll see what happens with our test scene. So we don't have that yet, but if I pause and I go to tech tree, so the range amplifier requires something. This tech tree is not a tree. It's not good. But let's see. So if we go over here, the range amplifier requires the overcharger. Where's the overcharger? There it is. Double click to unlock. And then that requirements level 3 overcharger. Okay. Am I not level 3? I'm level 53. What do you mean? Oh, there it is. Okay, so interesting. That doesn't refresh until we leave the tech tree and come back. So that is a bug. Okay, so now if I unpause, I right click, we can buy a range amplifier. It's not placeable. It's unfortunate. Collision with existing obstacle, collision with okay, so if we go back to 3D, maybe the collision shape is too low. Ah, there we go. So your range, oh, we don't see a range preview. That doesn't seem right. So if I place that, oh, I can't place it. How did it take damn? Oh, that we got some bugs, but it is affecting the range of things, which is pretty cool. Recursively, even. Collision with existing obstacles, interesting. So we can't place this at all, huh? Okay, let me try refreshing. Of course, we have to replay the adding the overcharger and then adding the range amplifier, and then we can add it to the hotbar, but we still can't place it. Collision with existing obstacle. Why? Why does it think so? Collision with existing obstacle. Okay, so here, or rather here, happens when has obstacle collision returns true. So this is an obstacle placement.gd. The target position is the projected location from the mouse on the ground. We set the global position of the obstacle detection raycast to be the target position plus raycast start. Interesting. So this obstacle detection raycast, where did this come from? It is something that we create. Is there like a debug? Ooh. Do we have something weird with collision shape? Or on range amplifier? Collision? Yeah, 2 and 6. That should be the same as like on basic turret. 2 and 6. Oh. So entity placeable obstacle. We didn't set that up. So this needs an element. And this needs to be our not that. This needs to be editable children. There we go. So we can see the mesh. And then we go here and we assign the tower mesh to there. That's the problem. So now if we reload and do all the things again of tech tree, overcharger. Yeah, this UI needs some love. Okay, and then we place a turret, and then we add range amplifier to the hotbar, and we can place. And if we add more, then if we get some free scrap. Right, and then we look at a turret. It's every turret's range is well, not that one, but the ones that are still in the range of the set of self-amplifying range amplifiers have wild ranges, right? Okay, so the range amplifier should be probably pretty expensive, given that. But I like the idea of the towers stacking. We don't get a preview though when we hover over the range amplifier, like we do with the turret. Why is that? Probably. No, I don't know. So shooting obstacle. No, we don't have any of the hover stuff in here, right? It's ooh, maybe. Hold on, main.gd. Where's that hover logic? Here we go. Handle shooting obstacle hover. Aha. Okay, so this should not be for shooting obstacles. This should be for ranged obstacles. That'll break something. That's fine. Yep, ranged obstacle. Ranged obstacle. Ranged. Ranged. Okay, so what did we break? This up here. This should be handle range obstacle hover. And then this is something that's probably defined up here that needs to be changed to hovered ranged obstacle. Ranged obstacle. Ranged. Ranged. There we go. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Now if we hover over the towers, we also see their range, which they self-amplify. Now they're much smaller, right? And then that one is even smaller because it doesn't have any amplifiers to amplify its amplification. All right, cool. That works. Yep, that's basically true. Okay, so that is the range amplifier. Now, what this describes is different than what I've implemented, because what I have done is I've made it give a fixed amount. Do we want a fixed amount or do we want a percentage? Oh, so here it says it is a percentage, but I have treated it as an amount. So that's on me. So this should be more like 0.15 for like 15%. Of course, that's not what I did. I did like 100%. We'll do like 30%, and then we need to fix everything to actually respect that as a percentage. Is there a way in for our export to tell let's see, Godot export properties, hints. Yeah, hints is the word I was trying to think of. So maybe export range. Colors, nodes. Thinking about like if there was something specifically for percentages where it's like between 0 and 1. Export custom. Okay, so range. We do something like that. So if we go back to Godot now and we reload from disk and we look at the buff amount, we get a value that's we can range from 0 to 1. I'm happy with that. So now we actually need to treat it as a percentage that we're amplifying. So we don't actually do anything with buff amount other than passing it through in here, so we can just ignore that. It's really here where we are doing the thing. So I think maybe what we can do is we can maybe we just want to save original effect range, maybe underscore. It's private. So we're only calling handle add buff if this is a different buff than the previous one. Oh, it's almost ad time. Okay, well, can we get through this? I guess the question is, do we... If it's a percentage... If we just try to remove a percentage, this doesn't quite work right. But potentially there are multiple buffs. So how do we unwind that in a way that makes sense? I don't think we can math unwinding the buff. How's that gonna work? Are we going to... Maybe we should have a running tally of the buff amounts for each type. And then have the original one Yeah. I think that could work. So stacked buffs. This will be just an array of floats. How do we make an array? And so what we do is we say, okay, if we're adding a buff, then we're going to add that to stacked buffs. If the stacked buffs is empty, we store the original effect range. And then we say effect range is equal to stack buffs. And this should also have an underscore. So let's do it this way. Result original for buff and stacked buffs. We want to multiply in the buff. Yeah. This is 1 plus the buff amount, and then return the result. You don't have empty. Length. No, I don't know. Size. There we go. All right. Well, it's break time, so I'll be back in 3 minutes, and we'll continue making this all work consistently.